Thank you for coming, everyone. So thanks for taking your beautiful day, Thursday afternoon. This is KPMG. Thanks for coming along. My name is Peter Xing. I'm a tech innovation, working tech innovation at KPMG, and we usually have these meetups at the pub, like every fortnight. So it's at the Metro pub, but you know, every few months or so, we have a presentation type event like this, just to go through the latest developments in science and technology on emerging technologies that we are like today. And I figured we probably should make it on a monthly basis because there's been so much happening in the science and tech world that it's just so hard to keep up. So today we have a few fantastic speakers to go through with you. We've got Meow-Ludo, we've got Nathan Waters. Hey Jay. We've got Elise, and we've also got Steve at the back there. If you have just an iPhone or something like that, that's the QR code to the Facebook page. So if you just bring it up, it should go straight to the Twitter as well. If you have anything to tweet, use the hashtag Transhumanism, and we're at Transhumanism.au. So, transhumanism, like what is it, right? It sounds a bit weird. So usually, transhumanism, we get confused with some other movements like the LGBTI, and we're all for that. But really, what it is all about, it's about transcending the limitations of our human biology through science and technology. So, this would be increasing our intelligence. So you've got the super intelligence sort of theme to it, merging ourselves with artificial intelligence, or just using, devices to make us smarter. There's super longevity, which is using devices or other medicines to actually increase the healthy lifespan of the normal human. So the average age in the Western world is roughly 80 years old. But science says that there's a physical limit, maybe at 120 if you live healthy enough. But what if you can edit the human genome and other topics like that to actually extend that upper limit in the human biology? And the right one over there is super well-being. How do you use technology to actually increase your happiness and well-being in the world? We've gone through the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How do you use technology to help with your food, water, and safety? How do you use it to enhance your sort of notion of self, your purpose through the entire hierarchy? And how do you sort of transcend all those limitations that you might have in the physical world? So, with that, that's a brief introduction to transhumanism. I'm not the star today, it'll be the speakers. Just going to do a quick highlight of some of the emerging technologies. Some of you might have heard Gartner Hype Cycle that just came out in August. Have you guys heard of that? Put your hand up if you have. This is the typical hype cycle curve for emerging technology. So any new technology starts with an innovation trigger, whether that be a scientific discovery, or a new type of material, or a way of applying that technology. And it goes through that sort of innovation trigger, and it sort of distills throughout the masses. As more people find out about it, usually at corporate events, or those sort of Singularity University style TED Talks, it gets hyped up. So it sort of starts being inflated in the expectation of what those technologies can do. And once that's sort of at the peak of the hype, that's when corporates usually come in and say, okay, well, we've got to get into this. We're gonna miss out. There's going to be a FOMO, fear of missing out effect on the technology, right? You can see right up there today, the peak of the hype is deep learning, carbon nanotube IoT platforms, and for all of that, you have a little bit of a dip because as people start applying these technologies, they realize what they can and can't do with it. What's matching the hype versus the actual reality of what those technologies can achieve. And you see blockchain coming down a little bit. We've got head of blockchain and KPMG reckons he's going to skip this entire trough of disillusionment and go straight to this slope of enlightenment because that's what he's funded to do. But this is actually the typical hype cycle curve, and you can see mixed reality is coming down, but augmented reality is right at this trough where we're seeing companies like Magic Leap not really achieving the sort of hype that over the years of secret development they've actually been promising. But one thing is to note, virtual reality is no longer on this map anymore. So last year virtual reality was on it. Now it's just completely disappeared. It skipped the slope of enlightenment and just went straight to business as usual. So these technologies move fast. Oculus's sort of goal is to reach, getting 7 or 8 billion people connected on the virtual reality devices. Well, 1 billion is a pretty good goal, but they've achieved less than 1% of that. Although industry-wise, it's already achieved that sort of mainstream approach, and it's all about adoption now. So they scale that to the masses. So that's Gartner's hype cycle, and this year they've grouped all those technologies into these categories, these emerging technology trends for 2018. So here you have democratized AI. So this is all about how you use machine learning better, use deep neural networks, smart robots, virtual assistants, these chatbots, all of that, but it's democratized. So it's really easy to use. You no longer need to learn how to code to be able to use these tools, because now software vendors are providing them as drag and drop tools. And at KPMG, we're using some of the off-the-shelf counters to actually improve the productivity of our data scientists to actually automate some of that machine learning. That also includes autonomous vehicles, level 4 and level 5, right? They ask me the difference, but level 5 is just God mode, right? It'll just drive anywhere without needing a human to take control, but level 4 is just below that, so it can drive in some main roads, but not everything. So that's democratized AI. Then we have digitized ecosystems. That includes blockchain for data security, digital twin, so it's actually have a digital version of the physical objects that you have, and IoT platforms and other things, knowledge graphs. What's interesting this year though, do-it-yourself biohacking has hit the mainstream. So now, do-it-yourself biohacking is an official category on the Gartner Hype Cycle for 2018. And that includes biochips, biotech cultured or artificial tissue, brain-computer interfaces, exoskeletons, augmented reality, mixed reality, and smart fabrics. So corporate people are actually going to take these into account, right? They're going to start hyping up these technologies, and I think transhumanism, being sort of an emerging technology fitting within all these different areas, is actually going to ride this wave of hype, but also go through the trials of proof of concepts and actually go through that disillusionment and eventually find something that sticks, that works. The others, this group, this transparently immersive experience, that's kind of like another group, I reckon, because you've got 4D printing, you've got edge AI, so AI done at the edge. Essentially being able to compute at the device level rather than having to go to the cloud. You have self-healing systems, silicon anode batteries, smart dust, smart workspaces, etc. So it's a bit of an other category. Connected homes includes that. But the ubiquitous infrastructure includes 5G, and that's going to be a game changer in terms of how we can actually utilize faster internet speeds to adopt things like autonomous vehicles, do avatars using robotics. There's also carbon nanotubes as a new type of material to build things like space elevators. Right, there's a sort of very, very strong material you would need to actually connect the Earth to something that's an object in space. And then there's a whole suite of infrastructure that helps facilitate things like AI, neuromorphic hardware, and quantum computing. So yeah, those are the categories. And what we're going to be doing at the end of the talks later today is going to be trying to map all those transhumanist themes to these emerging technology trends. And we're going to have a panel discussion across all of those.
With the ubiquitous infrastructure, where does the NBN fit in there?
The NBN is already, it's just stuck in the trough of disillusionment permanently, right? It's never coming out. I think, it's just going to fall right off the map next year, I reckon, when 5G comes out and the trials.
They're bringing gigabit Ethernet, though.
Yeah, gigabit Ethernet's coming out. And you got, things like nano satellites providing 5G, so we could get to a point where...
We're only... South Korea, Japan, and Singapore, 10 gigs, so already
got 10 gigs, so we're already behind. We're in the trough right now. Pretty much. I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. His name is Meow-Ludo Meow-Meow, and that's his Facebook profile. He's co-founder of Biohacker, Chief Strategy Officer of VivoKey, Civil Disobedience Enabler at Transport New South Wales, and works at UTS. He's also the CTO of Adaptgrow and worked at Lifestyle Labs. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to Meow. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Where? Yeah. What's that? Nice. Hey.
Come on.
Oh, transfer. This way.
Yes.
All right. All right. Sweating. Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Meow!
been thinking about doing this talk for a little while. For those of you who don't know me, I set up Biofoundry, which is Australia's first open access molecular biology lab, and I've done a whole lot of other things, and we're really interested in genetic engineering. In particular, the practical applications of genetic engineering. So a lot of researchers at universities and things are always looking into like what genes do and how to control them, but very few of them make anything that's useful or any cool products. And we had Elon Musk recently say, now that we've got rockets out of the way, we can finally move on to genetically engineered cat girls. So I sat there and I was wondering, I wonder if you could actually do it and what that would entail. So, as you know, he's pretty good whenever he finds something he loves. In this case, it's anime.
Yeah.
Can't hear. What's that?
What do you think?
Oh, I don't know how to do it.
You know, put your microphone.
Can you hear?
Sorry, guys.
One sec. Is that better? Yeah?
Yeah.
Better? Can everyone hear me?
Just.
Just?
You might hear it through that, that's only
Normally we need to
that's
recording.
It's only recording.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna project.
I'll have to project as much as I can. Okay. Yeah, so basically anything that he likes, he seems to chuck a lot of money in, and he seems to be pretty successful. So I went and had a look what makes up a cat girl, and it's pretty much a normal girl except for two elements, which is the tail and the ears. I've decided to focus on one aspect of this today, which is the tail. The ears are a little bit more complicated, and it's common across all of them. It's like a defining thing of a cat girl. I actually asked Facebook before this for some feedback on what I should talk about. Some people said it was a bit sexist, so you can also have a cat boy or a gender ambiguous cat person. Okay, so can we actually do it? So I've broken it apart and we kind of need funding. The hardest thing probably is a place where it's legal or viable. The tools to do it, and that's talking about the genetic tools, and an understanding of how tails actually grow in animals, other animals.
Hey, Meow?
Yep.
I get to too many details. I've got someone here who would actually do it.
Yeah.
So don't get to too much detail.
Well, we wouldn't do it in Australia
Oh, he would.
because of this piece of legislation. It's quite entertaining and quite short if you feel like reading it afterwards, and I'll make my slides available. I highlighted some very important things in it, which is basically, sum it down, you can't make chimeric embryos and you can't make hybrid embryos, which is basically any way that we want to do this that uses animal DNA, you can't do it. And even if we found out a way to use human genes, as we'll talk about in a little bit, to do it, it would still be illegal. Penalty 15 years. I don't think you want to go to jail as a cat person. But that's Australia. So China and America are both super keen to get involved with human genetic modification. They've both made modified human embryos. And in one case, there was a heart disease, 72% of 18 embryos that were created using this modified DNA were viable, which is huge. If you looked at this last year, it was almost every single one failed. There was heaps of problems, there was off-target mutations. So it looks like it works. So on the tools thing, yeah, it looks like we should be right. Also, we can't turn adults into cat people. This will all be talking about modifying embryos. I won't go heaps into why that is, but it's easy to make changes in the development more than it is to take an adult and try and get them to grow something. Okay, and we can do this pretty cheap. I set up, my lab cost probably about $15,000 of my own money. It's about $2,000 I reckon now, which is pretty cool. And Australians, there's funding available because Australians demand to have public relevance for research funding now. So I think we've got a strong case to get that. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to go into the genetics a bit now. I did a whole bunch of research, and there are no known examples of humans growing tails. Now this is really interesting because when Charles Darwin first proposed the theory of evolution, people are saying, oh, well, why are there no like humans running around with tails, and why isn't this like a mutation that happens? We still don't fully understand that, but the closest thing that they have is this pseudo tail. This was the least disturbing human tail photo I found. This is an MRI of the tail. So it's not a real tail. They call it a real tail because there's an even dumber tail. And it's basically just a collection of nerves, fat, and sometimes some like cartilage, but no vertebrae or muscles. No vertebrae or spine or anything like that. Even in really extreme cases, I went through every single one of them. Because that would be the easiest way.
Is it possible, like prosthetics and we do everything? Is it possible to make an actual prosthetic?
That's the easiest way of doing it, but not genetically. So basically, there's other primates that have tails, and this is very similar to the type of tail a catgirl would have. I don't know whether the fur covers the entire thing or whether you can grow just a bit with the fur. That's for next presentation. But it's definitely possible. So only about 40 million years ago, we had the tails that we're after. So those genes are definitely still inside us. Why don't we grow tails? So yeah, basically I did some research, and it says we don't really know why in primates, but an interesting thing came about recently, which is a fusion of two disciplines in biology. There's a really great video on YouTube, which is the Despacito, and it's done to the words Evo Devo, and it got me really excited in this. So it's basically a fusion of evolutionary biology with developmental biology. And when we started looking, we started to find the same genes all the way across the animal kingdom. So these colours basically directly map genes that control fly development to human development. So we may not need to find the genes in a primate to be able to work out which genes would control human tail formation. So it was discovered in America, I forgot the dude's name, Ed Colwell. He found flies that grew legs where their antennae should be, and he started investigating the genome, and he found that you can basically move sections of the DNA around or express them at different times, and you can cause things that would grow or have grown in other things to grow there. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction to genetics. So this is basically my entire degree in one slide. Seriously, DNA gets turned into RNA, and RNA gets turned into proteins. So DNA contains kind of all the instructions that you need, and there's kind of two sections to that as well. There's kind of like building blocks that you can use, and then what order to assemble them in. So they're both on the DNA, but they have different functions. And we've generally in biotech been really keen on what proteins we can make. So there's very commercially useful ones that are worth thousands of dollars a litre. But I'm going to say that it might actually be more interesting to look in the regulation instead. So basically DNA is like bound up around proteins in something called a chromosome, and they're like chapters of your book. For DNA to be read, it generally needs to be activated by something called a transcription factor. So transcription factors join the DNA and they recruit other proteins, and when enough of them are there, it causes a gene to be expressed. This will be very important because we're going to look at a very specific transcription factor, and it's called the HOX. The HOX genes control something called the homeobox proteins. They decide when genes get switched on and off. So they're the genes that we were looking before when it had the fly and the human. By changing these, we can affect the development and shape of all the body parts of any animal. That actually goes all the way down to trees and microbes. So basically, you've got a series of genes that sit on the DNA, and when they get expressed, they bind to various places in the genome. So if you look at this brown one on the left, it binds to multiple places, and the combination of those genes expressing causes an antenna or causes a leg. There's something else that is a bit interesting, which is these are called the HOX genes. If you look at the top, that's a linear sequence of DNA, a representation, and then you look at the next, which is the pupa, and then the final fly at the end. The genes actually correspond to where in the animal they express. This is called collinearity. So even if we don't know where the gene is, we know where in the genome we should be looking for it. If you've reached the shoulders, you haven't gone far enough. Keep on going down. Also, just interestingly, the way that we found this, they all share a sequence of 180 base pairs. So we just went basically control F through the genome, and anything that had that 108 base pairs was a Hox gene. Can anyone guess where in, or what function it might have?
Like blocks to hops linkings to host.
Yep, so it's basically the DNA binding section, and there's basically, you've got two bits to the gene. There's this bit, the purple section, which is the DNA binding section, and then there's a region of specificity, so it can work out which genes it wants to express. Okay, so how does this help us get catgirls? Humans have had tails when we were monkeys, so we probably have we almost definitely have the genes for it. Our coccyx is fused vertebrae, so we need to change the expression of those genes, and it should grow a tail. So our coccyx would form exactly the same way a tail does. There's a sequence of genes that initiate bud formation and then grow a vertebra. This is a mouse, and we've managed to, in a mouse, work out exactly which sections of its genome control tail development. We learned even more when we started comparing, and this is very recent, this is only a few months ago. We've just worked out the difference between snake and mouse development, and basically they utilize different kind of tricks to cause the vertebra to grow. So a snake uses a crazy one where it actually changes the molecular clock to grow ever more vertebra, and then it regulates different Hox genes along the way. So, if I've still got anyone, also there's about 5 genes that control it. And the difference in expression is this. So I might just let you have a look. No color. There you go. So you'll see different Hox genes along the way are controlling different types of tail. I think that's going to be the most difficult bit, but we know now how to accelerate the rate of division of the cells that will become the vertebrae. Not in humans, but in other animals. So we're getting close. So just to recap, I think I'm under time. I'm okay on time. Yeah. So yeah, basically we know how to do it in other animals. If we want to do it in humans, it's going to be very difficult unless we actually try it. But I think we have all the information that we need to go through and make the first attempts. Future directions for biotech. So I think the really exciting thing about this type of research is a rethinking of the way that we use genetic modification techniques. So instead of getting things like algae and yeast to produce new proteins, maybe we should be regulating things like trees and animals to produce the things that we're interested in. So maybe it's regulating fruit development or something like that. So changing what they already do rather than forcing them to do something that they're not naturally able to do. And I think that's kind of the most exciting repercussions of this way of thinking. What about the ears? I reckon don't use genetics. Stellax said I could use this image, and he's a very famous Australian biohacker, kind of kicked off the whole grinding movement in Australia. He's granddaddy biohacker, and he's got a very functional, aesthetically pleasing ear. So I reckon the combination of those two things, we're going to do all right getting catgirls. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Questions? Thanks, Meow.
How much?
So is it possible to grow tails in adults?
Not in adults. I don't reckon. Not,
So it
not
has
at
to
our
be an
current,
embryo?
Not
Or?
in our current stage. Yeah, because you have to initiate the right basic cascade during the embryo forming. So up until about 35 days, the human embryo already has a tail. And then it gets absorbed back in. So it's saying that there's a variety of transcription factors that are happening during that time that are causing a reversal of what we all clearly want. Yeah.
What about transplant grafting? Because there's a lot of organs we can use from other animals.
Yeah.
So what about a monkey type of thing that does have a tail?
Yeah. So you can do something really cool, which people are seriously interested in at the moment, which is xenotransplantation. So what we do is we'd get a monkey and we'd humanize it so that it's expressing, for example, your own proteins and antibodies, and then when you graft it on, you don't need anti-rejection drugs. We're doing it with pigs at the moment, so we're getting them to grow livers and things like that, which is good news for me. I'm about 30 years away from eating none of those.
Is it any liver restrictions?
In Australia, you can't do it. It's explicitly banned by the Human Cloning.
So it falls under cloning, does it?
It falls under the Human Cloning Act. That Cloning Act is like the no fun act.
Exactly.
Can't make hybrids, can't make... Basically, one interesting thing about that Cloning Act as well is that you can't have a child with more than 2 genetic parents, which means people in Australia are actually restricted from receiving mitochondrial gene therapy, which has been proven safe and effective in other places around the world, which is kind of a sad thing about that legislation. Final question?
So I'm not sure if you've spoken about it, but
Yeah.
what about reversal? Like, you know, what if someone was like, you know, born up with his tail, but then oh, you know,
Yeah.
someone do this.
At the moment, they chop everyone's tail off who has it. Almost all of them. If someone wanted to get rid of it, I reckon it will be, you could do it, but I wouldn't advise
As
it.
in, like, would there be like repercussions, like for example, in like I think it was in cats or something.
Yeah.
If they did lose a tail, they'd sort of lose a bit of like balance. So
Yeah.
would that sort of be the case in humans with tails?
I'm an experimental scientist, so I would have to go and create it
Okay.
to work it out. But definitely, it could be a thing. But I'm excited for the transhumanist future where we all have tails and we can work this out. Awesome.
Thanks, Meow. Give a round of applause. Yeah, all right. It's getting quite warm in here, so if you want to use the bathroom, go outside for a breather, we'll take 5. And then after that, we'll have Elise Sue talking about the future of automation. Yeah. Grab a drink of water if you like. Before